What's going on YouTube? It's Teach, back again with another video, and today I wanted to dish out my quarterback rankings. We're going to go team by team and basically give you the top 32 NFL starters. I also made this a tier list so you can get an idea of like where I think these starting situations are at, because sometimes I feel like the number next to a name doesn't really do it justice. Just because like someone's QB 13 doesn't mean I think they're a bozo. So I wanted to do the tiers, but also you're going to see them 1 through 32. And I am going to do this based on who I think will be starting a majority of the season. So I'm not, especially with the rookies, we are going to talk about rookies in this. I'm not, saying they're going to start week 1, but what I am saying is, I anticipate JJ McCarthy starting more games this year than Sam Darnold. I anticipate Drake May playing more games than Jacoby Brissett. So with all that down, I am excited to go ahead and jump right into this. Leave me your thoughts down below. Who should be a higher? Who should be a lower? What do you think about the tiers? I'd really prefer you focus on the tiers than like the number next to a guy's name. But let's go ahead and start. Let's go ahead and go 32 up to 1. I don't do that a whole lot. I feel like everyone knows who number 1 is anyway. So we go ahead and kick things off with Jarrett Stidham / Bo Nix. So Bo Nix is going to be the guy I have representing the Broncos. I do think he is going to start probably week 1. Like I don't really see his reason not to. I think he's a good fit for Sean Payton's offense. He's a rookie. He's unproven. But I do think of him as a high floor guy. But I also think the NFL right now, like there's a handful of names that, depending on how long this video is, I'll go ahead and put him in here so you get an idea of where, Russell Wilson would fit into this, where Jarrett Stidham himself would fit into this, and all that sort of stuff. But I think there's probably 36 to 40 guys that I think are capable of starting. Obviously, that's including the guys at the top of the list. But I think there's probably 4 to 8 backup quarterbacks that legitimately could have been starters. Like Jacoby Brissett last year, dropped him on the Jets instead of being the backup for the Commanders. They're probably faring a lot better than what they were with Zach Wilson. So, and obviously Zach Wilson's not here representing the Broncos. So little things like that, just kind of want to get that point proven. But I do think it's going to be Bo Nix that's starting, and ultimately I do think it's the weakest of the starting quarterback positions, which not too far away from that. I'm going to have JJ McCarthy just edge out Bo Nix. They were my QB 5 and 6, both in the same tier. And then you look at the situations and give me the guy that has Justin Jefferson freshly paid, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson freshly paid, somewhat freshly paid, new running back in there, KOC calling plays. I like Sean Payton, but I also think KOC's a wizard. I think the supporting cast around JJ's probably a little better. Also, I don't hate the Denver tackles, but definitively Darrisaw and O'Neal. That's one of the best tackle tandems in football. So JJ McCarthy's got a great situation. They come in at number 31. Him and Darnold. Again, I have I had another list. I almost did this just based off quarterbacks, not teams, but it got a little messy. So if you want to know specifically where I'd have Sam Darnold, where I'd have JJ McCarthy, just drop a comment down below and I'll make sure I get back to you on that. All right. Then we get on to QB number 30. This is going to be Gardner Minshew / Aiden O'Connell, but I think it's going to be Gardner Minshew. I think you paid him that money because you want to see him, starting as many games as possible. Weirdly enough, I guess Gardner wasn't already on this list, but Gardner now on this list, he's going to come in at number 30. I think he's a solid, again, the word capable comes to mind. He's a good enough guy to be starting, if you had to, 17, 16 games, 16, 17 games for you. Not going to wow you with arm strength, but definitely has a lot of moxie, can do enough with his legs, accurate enough. Gardner Minshew, honestly, if you were to get an 8-game sample, 4 of them are pretty solid. There might be 2 to 3 that are pretty good. And then there's one disaster. Just once every 8 starts, there's going to be a disaster somewhere there in Gardner Minshew's, future. But ultimately, it's more good than bad. That's kind of what gives him a little bit more of an edge over some of the rookies here. Where I don't necessarily know what we're going to get into, even though I do think there's a lot of upside in JJ, and I think Bo comes with a pretty high floor. All right, next up, I'm going to get Bryce Young into the mix here. I'm excited to see what year 2 has in store. I'm excited about this Dave Canales hire. Their offseason has been pretty clearly focused on getting him weapons, right? Adding a Deontay Johnson, drafting an Xavier Legette, very different skill set than Deontay, and a very different skill set than Adam Thielen, who's still there. You also draft a running back in the top 50, Jonathan Brooks. I've never been a big Miles Sanders, guy. I drafted Chuba Hubbard in a ton of fantasy leagues just because I didn't think, Sanders was gonna cut it, and I think Jonathan Brooks steps in day one, even post-injury, is their best back. But also, like, spending big money on guards in free agency. I think the situation around Bryce Young's gotten better on top of what Dave Canales has done last 2 years, working with Geno, working with Baker. They both coincide with careers for those two guys. So, and you hear how Canales talks about Young. He is the former number 1 overall pick. My top quarterback in that class was a monster at Bama. Great pocket awareness, great accuracy, a deep, enough arm strength to play on the deep ball. So I'm optimistic about Bryce Young going into year 2. But I got to be honest, like, you told myself a year ago he'd be this low, and I'd be feeling as concerned as I am going into year 2. I don't know if I would have believed you, considering where I thought he was going into the draft. All right, then we're going to get Daniel Jones up next. And part of the reason, again, focus on tiers, because, like, 2 years ago, pretty solid year for Daniel Jones. He's probably, 5 to 8 spots higher than where he is right now. But last year was obviously rough, then he gets hurt and stuff. So this is going to be a make or break year. One, for the standpoint of if the Giants are going to hold on, that must mean Daniel Jones had a hell of a season. But more than likely, I do see the Giants moving on from Jones at the end of this upcoming season. So he's not only kind of playing for his Giant future, he's playing for his NFL future this year. So a lot of motivation there. He's got a clear-cut number 1 wide receiver in the building now. Some work done to that offensive line. And running back situation is a little worse, but they still have some weapons there. And I don't think it's going to be totally inept of talent with Singletary and probably Eric Gray leading the way there in the backfield. But this is going to be a make-or-break year for Daniel Jones. But the thing is, he's been so scattershot. We've seen some good weeks. We've seen some good years. We've also seen some disastrous weeks and some disastrous years. And also his health comes into question here. So, like him and Young, like I know Panthers fans can be like, are you kidding me? The number 1 overall pick is behind Daniel Jones. Like, and I hear you. Like, trust me, I don't take pleasure in saying that, but I also think back to Jones a couple of years ago, and can he get towards that solid, capable, mid-tier quarterback play like I think he was a couple of years ago, really specifically using his legs to kind of keep defenses on their toes. So it's going to be a big year for Daniel Jones. Could be a guy that falls down a handful of spots, could be a guy that rises up a handful of spots. And then we're going to start getting into some more rookies. I'm going to have Jaden Daniels up next. If you're just asking me, like, just starting to franchise in your choice of Daniel Jones, Jaden Daniels, like, give me Daniels. I think honestly, in a lot of ways, they bring similarities to the table. Jones with a bigger frame, but they're both good with their legs. And I like Jaden Daniels' arm strength a little bit more, though. So, it's kind of interesting having you draft a quarterback number 2 overall, like, not unbelievable to think that he wouldn't be the worst quarterback in the division, but it's kind of how I'm seeing it right now. Like, and with Washington's situation, he's got good receivers. Cliff Kingsbury of it all kind of makes me a little iffy. Like, I want to know what he's learned from his time post-Arizona, but on paper, throwing to Terry McLaurin, throwing to Jahan Dotson, that kind of excites me. A couple of backs that are capable. Offensive line that needs some work, but, Cosme's coming into his own. A change made at left tackle. See, Brandon Coleman can earn that starting spot week 1, but, I think Daniels is pretty solid. But, it's pretty close. All 3 of these guys, Young, Daniel Jones, and Jaden, depending on how you feel about a rookie quarterback stepping into the NFL, I can see a world where you flip these guys around, but at this point, I think Daniel's upside definitely gives him the nudge over Jones, and then I'm kind of iffy and a little tepid going into the season about Bryce Young. So that's kind of just trying to give a little bit of an explanation of why I have it breaking out in this order, despite the fact that I have not seen Jaden Daniels take a single professional NFL snap. All right, after Jaden, we're going to get to Drake May. I am just kind of sticking to my draft rankings here. If I'm honest, I am taking situation into account. I'm kind of projecting forward to this upcoming season. But that being said, Jaden, because of that, because of supporting cast, Jaden probably has better numbers this year than Drake May, right? Like, offensive line's kind of, iffy at both spots. Maybe there's just kind of one spot for the Patriots at left tackle where you're like, can we get that better? Commanders, maybe it's a few more, but also, like, look, I love Javon Baker, I love Jalen Pollock, but none of those guys right now are not, and I'm not willing to say that they are Terry McLaurin, especially before I see him take a snap, right? And, it's T-Max, Jahan Dotson, who's flash, capable running backs too, and some other tertiary weapons there. So I don't know, like supporting cast-wise, maybe there's a reason I should have Jaden ahead of him, but I saw Drake May as a 1B to Caleb Williams 1A, like the arm strength. I think, honestly, the mechanical stuff could be cleaned up in as quick as one offseason. I think it's very similar to Justin Herbert, right? You get into this habit in draft cycle, you're looking at one minute detail and you want to harp on it. You want to just stick on it, and you want to have that be the reason you can't buy into someone. And then in reality, it's like, oh, that's very fixable. Okay. Well, damn. That arm talent and that athleticism certainly plays a whole lot more than that one little nitpick that was fixed. So I think Drake May is going to have a similar kind of career arc, at least early on, to what happened with Justin Herbert, at least in my opinion. But Drake May is going to come in just ahead of Jaden Daniels. And then after that, we're going to have Anthony Richardson. And Richardson's a tough one, man. Like, had a higher grade on May, but it's like, Michael Pittman, Adonai Mitchell, Josh Downs, some decent tight ends, Jonathan Taylor, Shane Steichen. Like, yeah, give me that Indianapolis situation any day of the week over New England. But that being said, man, for a guy that, this is kind of crazy to say, who had more dropbacks than J.J. McCarthy last year, actually? Anthony Richardson, his last year at Florida. But he still came in the league as this guy who just needed more reps. Like, I didn't think the throwing motion was mechanically flawed. I think he's a sick athlete. I just think he needed more reps to see defenses get more polished at reading it, going through, decision-making processes through the read, and then, ultimately, especially with his athleticism, find that, that balance of when's the right time to tuck and run. Some guys are a little too eager to do it. Some guys aren't eager enough, right? So it's just going to take time. It's going to take some reps, and then, he gets hurt, 4 weeks into his career? So that's tough. He was kind of the one guy that if I could give 17 games to, I feel a whole lot better about, just because the pure reps and the pure progression that he's going to make. Because I think the dude has all the talent in the world. He's just like, get this guy some reps and let's see where it can take him. But I'm going to have Anthony Richardson come in here just ahead of May and Daniels again, because going into year 2, he's got another offseason under his belt. He is working with a great offensive-minded head coach. He has a really nice supporting cast. And I mean, ultimately, throughout his missed time, hopefully, he's taking this time to kind of mentally work himself through reps and really hitting the tape hard, because if so, then maybe year 2 could be a really, really special one for Anthony Richardson. I'm excited to see what he's going to be this upcoming season. Then I have Justin Fields come in here. He is going to be my Steelers representative. To me, and I mean, this is solely my opinion, other Steelers fans, let me know your thoughts on this, but I just don't know how you could look at the last 2 years of Russell Wilson versus Justin Fields and say Russ is better. Like, simply put, I don't see it that way. And also, like, if you were to ask me, hey, or you're going to tell me, hey, TJ, in 3 years, one of these two guys is still going to be starting for you, there's a 0% chance that I think that's Russell Wilson. There is some percentage of a chance, a more than 0% chance, that it could be Justin Fields. So for me, the decision's easy for Pittsburgh. There's one of these two guys could be a potential starter down the line, and one of these two guys has been better the last 2 years. Oh, wait, that's the same guy for both things? Start him, so I think it should be Justin Fields. I think he's a good fit for Arthur Smith's offense. I do think the passing and his ability to read a defense has gotten better, but at kind of a snail's pace. But what he can do just athletically is just leaps and bounds better than Russell Wilson too. So he at least brings that dynamic to the game. Honestly, when it comes to processing speed, it almost feels like that almost correlates to his comfortability throwing to a guy, right? Like DJ Moore last year, if the play's targeted to go to DJ, ball's going out to 2, ball came out quick. But it's some of those other targets where it was like, just plant your foot and go, man. Like, just make the throw. Don't overthink this. Or, sometimes it'd be the opposite, right? Like, you could tell, like, this guy's had a lot of pressure and he's probably lived in his head, like mental health. Like, honestly, need to check on Justin Fields, need to make sure he's on the up and up there. Because I know a lot of people have told him what to do, and now he's probably second guessing everything. But, like, there'd be some plays, even throughout his tape last year, where it's like, you were looking at him just half a second longer. Just hold on it. You saw it, and then he just looks the other way. So the processing, the decision-making, all those need to be cleaned up. The fumbles, too. Like, that's going to be something he needs to clean up for sure. But nevertheless, I don't even see it close between him and Russell Wilson. Like, it's clear cut to me who's the better of those guys. So that's why I got Justin Fields just ahead of Anthony Richardson. Again, a little bit further along, had some more off seasons, deeper in his NFL career. But I could also see a world where Anthony Richardson's better than Justin Fields. This is a tough group, May through Fields here. All right, let's get on to our next quarterback leaving Fields. Let's talk about the man who replaced him in Chicago, and that is the number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams. He's going to be the last guy we talk about in the everyone else tier. And I mean, pretty close to put him on the good guys tier, like right away, but haven't seen him take a snap. So like, don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but the arm talent's there, super athletic, very mobile guy, multiple like spin moves, make defenders miss with the juke. Like, he's got a lot of that on tape. In a lot of ways, kind of feels like a more athletic, younger Rodgers. A lot of people want to see Pat Mahomes, but I kind of see like younger Rodgers with a little bit more juice in his step. And ultimately, it's just going to come down to his ability to play within the pocket, get the ball out quick. When kind of get into the draft season and getting to filter down, plays where he doesn't, break the pocket and he doesn't extend plays. Like, if you just digest his in pocket, the mundane plays, he can do it. He just did a whole lot of the other stuff more. So gonna have to find that balance, the next level, right? Like, I want a guy who can extend plays and do stuff that like Patrick Mahomes does, right? Like, only one guy really in the league. I mean, there's multiple guys doing it, but no one quite to the level of Pat, right? And you want to try to get as close to that as possible, if not, match it. in an ideal world. But at the same time, it can't come at the expense of like just taking the easy stuff. Turn that 1st and 10 into a 2nd and 4, and let's get some momentum going. Let's start this drive on a positive note, you know? So I think it's just going to take some time, probably a year. But I feel by like year 2, Caleb Williams is probably going to be at least a tier, maybe 2 to 3 higher. And by then, I think we will have seen, by the end of this first year, him be able to strike that balance of when do I need to get rid of it? When can I extend the play? And once he gets that down to me, like everything else is there. So, you know, a little bit of a feel thing, transition to the next level. That's going to take some time, but I don't know, 12 games in, I feel like Caleb Williams is going to be what I expect him to be as my number 1 prospect in this last year's draft. All right, let's get on to the next tier of the good guys. I got Derek Carr batting leadoff here. You know, Carr second half of last year was better than the first half. First half of last year, he's probably maybe just ahead of Fields and then behind Caleb. But second half of last year, I think we started to see him turn a corner. I'll also say like Pete Carmichael playing dress up as Sean Payton probably wasn't the best move for New Orleans. So having them, you know, I mean, Clint Kubiak's in a lot of ways probably going to be playing dress up Kyle Shanahan, but nevertheless, like, I'm more interested in seeing that. It's a little different, right? I think ultimately that scheme got a little stale, and I think Carmichael had the, you know, the Sean Payton kind of nuance and the ability to say, okay, cool, what's that next ripple? Like, I didn't think Pete Carmichael was that dude, and especially when it's not his offense. He was just trying to do what he could out of what he had gotten from Sean Payton, basically, in his time there. But changing OC, I think that's going to make him all the better. We're going to see how this tackle situation, this offensive line in general, right? Like when Carr was under pressure last year, and this has been a theme throughout his career, when he's under pressure, the play takes a pretty significant ding, and he's always been a guy to me that's a little too eager to get rid of the football, and a bad offensive line's only going to enable that much more, and especially in offense where, like, going into the season right now, your top 2 guys, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, field stretchers. Olave can do some stuff in the intermediate, Rashid Shaheed can be a yak weapon. I'm not trying to, like, just simplify all they do, but, like, when push comes to shove, I want to see you take deep shots to Chris Olave if he's on your roster. I want to see you take deep shots to Rashid Shaheed, make a defense respect that long speed. And a lot of good things happen when, you know, the deep ball is going that way. So I'm just kind of worried about how that offensive line might give you a negative correlation to the number of big play threats, the number of deep passes that Carr is going to try to attempt with Olave and Shaheed. And then, you know, if that's going to be the case, is Cedric Wilson going to be your slot guy eating up underneath? Because it sounds like you're going to need him. Could you have a reunion with Hunter Renfrow and Derek Carr? Could that be something you want to explore? Is Juwan Johnson, these tight ends, they going to become more involved? So just going to be interested to see who that, you know, is it just going to be Alvin Kamara? You know, a lot of volume for him last year, you know, once he was back. So I don't know. That's my main concern. This O-line with Derek Carr. Second half of last year gave me some optimism, thinking, okay, cool. Now he's got his feet settled, but I just worry this offensive line is going to kind of put him right back to where he was the first, you know, 8 or so weeks of last season. All right, after Carr, I'm going to have Geno Smith edge him out. You know, I've been a pretty big Geno Smith fan since he's gotten this chance in Seattle. And you know, you're going to hear this phrase, especially here in the good guys to can be and should be, but actually probably not as much there, but in the good guys and then the mostly really good guys. You know, I don't know if anyone else calls him this, but like triggerman, and also I don't know if that's like politically correct, but nevertheless, you know, like Geno Smith's like, to me, like an ideal mid-tier like triggerman. Like if you got a good offensive system that's going to scheme guys open, think about like Jared Goff in like LA. McVay's going to scheme it up. He's got sharp route runners in Woods and Kupp. They'll get open. Goff can be the trigger man, point, shoot, boom, ball's out. Ball's in the hands of his playmaker. I think that's kind of what Geno Smith just needed to be in Seattle, especially with Shane Waldron now in Chicago, by the way. Another reason for me to be excited about Caleb Williams, but had a good OC. Offensive line got better, at least going into that first year with Geno. And then you have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Awesome. And then last year you have the 2 backs, those 2 receivers, plus JSN. Even better, right? So I do think last year was a bit of a step back. And you know, part of it's maybe the league's kind of caught on to his tendencies too. Like, you know, kind of breaks on the seam, but it's okay. Get a little more tape. We'll kind of figure you out. But I think there's no reason for me to not think that he could be a solid quarterback. Again, I'm not saying Geno Smith's elite. He's not, you know, top 12 on this ranking. Not really close. But just a capable, solid trigger man. And like, if you have a great offensive coordinator, you have great skill players, like you can win with that. And, you know, who knows? Like you go on a Cinderella run and make it pretty deep into the postseason. But, you know, I like Geno Smith. He doesn't break a whole lot more than, you know, strong arm, pretty accurate, nice touch, mobile enough. You know, it's just kind of like B to B plus across the board, but I think that functions. And now this year, I just kind of want to see him cut down on something, specifically the red zone turnovers. If we can clean up both these guys, to get better in the red zone, Geno and Derek Carr. And if they do that, I think they could definitely be guys who rise on next year's list. All right, leaving Geno, let's get to the man coming off a career year, Baker Mayfield. Obviously, an offensive coordinator change. Would have loved to see him stay with Dave Canales. That could have been a big boon for him going into year 2 of that system. But I also like Liam Cohen. Worked with Sean McVay. The good year of Will Levis at Kentucky 2022. That was Liam Cohen as the OC. Then he returns to Kentucky last year with the Rams kind of there in the middle. So I think that's a solid offensive coordinator. Going to keep probably a lot of those, systems in place. Like I could see where the scheme doesn't change a whole lot from Canales to Cohen. But also you bring back Mike Evans. You still have Chris Godwin and running back situation. Rachaad White felt like they finally figured out the right role for him. Not necessarily a bell cow back, but kind of like James White too. Like they can be. You can feature them as a back. And I think the Bucs, if their offensive line plays better, you'll see Rachaad White be a better runner. But it's also like White and James Cook are great receiving backs. Like utilize it, take advantage of that, and it felt like the Bucs kind of finally figured they're going to tap into that. So hopefully the run game gets a little bit better this year, that's for sure, especially on early downs. So they're going to continue insisting on doing that. It's going to be interesting to see how Cohen's influence versus Todd Bowles, like how much is that Bowl, how much was that Canales last year, and then how much is it going to be Cohen this year. But solid quarterback, finally felt like he found a place that wanted to bind to him. Enough mobility, not special, but can extend plays, can scamper to get 5 yards. Arm has always been a big plus. Sometimes it leads to him overthrowing some stuff, airmailing a few passes, specifically over the middle, which makes you hold your breath. But especially for big targets, you kind of get away with that a little bit. That's part of why I think, like fantasy-wise, like give me another year of this Baker and Mike Evans connection. I think Mike Evans in for another big year. Baker's kind of always favored these bigger targets too. So solid across the board. And I really like the arm strength. And now I'm just eager to see, can the Bucs O-line get better, and what does Liam Cohen, look like as a true NFL offensive coordinator? Because he's not calling plays in LA. Now he's got the reins of the offense. All right, then we're going to get to two guys that honestly I see very similarly, just as the right-handed option of the left-handed version of the other. I'll have Brock Purdy come in here, and then spoiler alert, it's going to be Tua just ahead of him. Honestly, in a lot of ways, you could flip these two. But Purdy's solid, man. Like, good enough arm strength, accuracy, the ability to extend a play. He feels like Jimmy Garoppolo, but with the ability that when the scheme, like when the guys aren't drawn open or the defense has the right answer for whatever Shanahan draws up, he's got the ability to kind of break pocket and make the backyard football play, where Jimmy Garoppolo just was not bringing that to the table. So that was like just that little bit more they needed at the quarterback position with all the skill guys they have around. And Purdy still has bad games too. Like, that Packers game, like the Packers probably should have won that playoff game in a lot of ways. And there were a lot of other rough games down towards the end of the season. I mean, the Ravens game where he got dinged up at the end, like that wasn't a pretty one. So Brock Purdy, it's tough. Like he'll go in these 5-game stretches, and part of it's Shanahan and the scheme, and right, like that's part of the reason I'm partial to PFF. I think they do a good job of kind of parsing out where like box score numbers don't tell the whole story. But dude, you'll go on a 5-game stretch and all of a sudden like Brock Purdy's the leading MVP guy. Like that conversation was being had last year. Like look at the stats, they're redonkulous. But it's actually like a part of that offense. But you got to give him credit. Like I think this is the best quarterback Shanahan has had in San Francisco running that scheme. Because not only can he run the scheme like Jimmy G, but he can, when the scheme needs that extension, Purdy can bring that. Jimmy G wasn't. And I'm saying obviously in San Francisco, because like Matt Ryan's 2016 season was awesome, and that's probably the best quarterback season that Shanahan's had from any one guy. That and maybe some of the years with Kirk, but I digress. Like Purdy just rock solid, going to get the job done. Got a bit of a baseball windup that always kind of irks me. The ball's a little slow to come out, and especially when it's like, dude, just get the ball to Brandon Ayuk, get it out quick. Sometimes that windup is something I always notice, but otherwise he's rock solid. And like I said, Tua Tagovailoa is going to be the next quarterback that we talk about here. In a lot of ways, kind of the left-handed version of it. Might be probably top 5, top 8. Honestly, I'll stick to top 5. I'm feeling bold. Top 5 quarterback when it comes to like their just pure touch. Like he has made some like post routes to Tyreek along the sideline that just like should not be there. Like where you have a razor thin margin of error and either you overthrow it and it's out of bounds or you underthrow it and it's a pick, and like he just threads the needle perfectly. Great touch, great accuracy. The arm straight's obviously lacking. He's mobile, but he's also at a point where it's like, one more hit to the head in the wrong way. It's like, this could end my career. So you don't see him utilize it a whole lot, but it is there to be used. But that arm strength also becomes a liability in a playoff game in Kansas City when it's ice cold. So like he comes with limitations, and that's part of the reason I was like, do I have Purdy ahead of him? Because I both think they have flaws, right? Like, look, if San Francisco had a top 8 quarterback last year, I think they win the Super Bowl. If Miami had a top 8 quarterback last year and a guy who could overcome the weather in the Kansas City and kind of rise to the occasion and kind of rival Patrick Mahomes, that'd be better, but rival him truly. Miami had a shot to win a Super Bowl, but like these two teams that have great rosters around these guys are mid-tier quarterbacks, and it's going to take a lot of, scheme success. Mike McDaniel feels like the last 2 years feels like the scheme gets caught on to a little bit by like week 12, week 13. Shanahan seems to elude that a little bit more, but then still you get to the Super Bowl and it's just not quite there. So that's kind of the tough part about this tier. Like, good quarterbacks, like, trust me, like there have been some bad quarterback play that I've seen, and like I've had to sit through some tough years, even as a Steelers fan. Like, one Matt Canada, but like there are a lot of teams that it's like, oh, dude, you just dropped Geno Smith on that team. They're not bad, they're okay, but it's also like, that's good moving the needle from like 6 wins to 9, but then getting 9 to 13. It takes a different caliber, dude. And I'm not saying that like obviously Purdy can get you there, and Tua could probably get you there, but that next step up, all right, cool, we're a double-digit win team, we made the playoffs, now let's go win the ring. And obviously that's eluded both these guys. Playoff wins have eluded the Dolphins and Tua, but that last win for Purdy and the 49ers. Anyways, this is such an interesting conversation to have. Like, how good does your quarterback need to be, or like how good does your roster need to be to elevate a middle tier quarterback? And then ultimately, how many times can you get away with that process? Can you win 1 in every 10 trips with a loaded roster, good enough quarterback? Or is it 1 in 20? Is it 1 in 4? You can get away with it, and the Chiefs have just kind of gotten lucky a couple of times with it. I don't know. It's just an interesting team building conversation. Anyways, let's skip past that. I probably lost a lot of people there. I can see the retention numbers dropping. Can and should be better. Okay, we'll start with Deshaun Watson here. Since he's gotten to Cleveland, man, it has not been great. There have been a couple games where you're like, okay, there it is. But I don't know if it's confidence. I don't know if it's a locker room thing because of the off the field stuff. I don't know what it is, but we have not seen 2020 Deshaun Watson since 2020, man. And part of that's, him sitting out and stuff. But obviously a new offensive coordinator comes in with Ken Dorsey. From what I've heard, he is going to be calling plays. Interested to see like what he did with Josh Allen, how much of that they want to do with Deshaun Watson. But I'm also looking at this receiver core, and this is crazy to say. I got Deshaun Watson, here in the can should be better, but like it's the best quarterback Jerry Jeudy's had. And all of a sudden, it's like Jerry Jeudy's probably the best number 2 that Watson's had, right behind Amari Cooper. Like, I'm excited about that. Hopefully, year 2 growth from Cedric Tillman. Hopefully, another year in the offense for Elijah Moore in Cleveland, I should say, at least. Makes him better. They're kind of figuring out the best ways to use David Njoku. So it feels like things are coming along, and we'll see what happens with Nick Chubb. Hopefully, he's back to 100%. I'm a Steelers fan, but I love me some Nick Chubb. That man's a fun running back to watch. But yeah, there's talent. We've seen elite upside out of Deshaun Watson. He just has not gotten there. And it's gotten tough. Like, how much of that 2020 accuracy, arm strength, mobility can I talk about when it's been 4 years since we saw it? Like, it's tough. Then we get Kyler, kind of up and down, to be honest with you, in my opinion, post injury, but also he returned mid-season while everyone's like hitting the ground. They're at 100%. They're week in and week out. They're ready to go. Kyler's first game. Like he's kind of getting that week 1. Trying, not necessarily, but like in his mind, it's like, okay, cool. I'm first game back, okay, and everyone else is middle of the year. The car is running, at max capacity, at maximum effort. So, but that being said, there's still some moments, right? Like, especially with his legs and how he can extend plays. I mean, it's like a little kid with your phone running away from you, but it looks like that on the field, dude. He's mad elusive. And also you go back, just 2 years ago, especially maybe it was 3 years ago when the Cardinals opened the year 7-0. When the Cardinals were 7-0, he was the clear-cut MVP frontrunner. Like, that upside and that potential is there with Kyler Murray. I just think he got a little bit of a tough draw with how he, when he returned from his injury. But now he's got a full offseason worth of work. Now he's got a clear-cut number 1 receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr. in the building, which I think Michael Wilson then going into year 2 looks that much better as the 2. James Conner there. They also add a running back, and Trey Benson. Love that fit with those 2 guys, 1-2 punch. Benson I also think should be utilized as a receiver. That's one more weapon that Kyler can lean on. Also, he found a really nice chemistry with Trey McBride down the stretch last year. So I think by the last couple of games, Kyler Murray was getting close to 100%. I think going into the season, we should expect nothing less than 100%. So Cannon should be better. These are 2 names that talent-wise should be a whole lot higher on next year's rankings. Now we're getting into the mostly really good tier. I'm going to go with Trevor Lawrence here to kick us off. It's tough, right? Like, which number 1 pick would I rather have right now, Trevor Lawrence or Kyler Murray? That's a tough conversation to have. I think Lawrence has been kind of held back a little bit. System in a lot of ways, like him and Justin Herbert feels like they're living kind of the same life where it's like, we just cannot find that right scheme, that right guy to unlock you. Also, I think weapons have been a concern. I think Calvin Ridley was an upgrade compared to what they could have had, but also not quite the upgrade that we thought he might be. And Christian Kirk ultimately has been the best receiver of this, Trevor Lawrence era. And, it's funny because considering that signing was the one that reset and broke the receiver market and everyone was clanning Jacksonville. Him and Evan Ingram have probably been the most reliable guys that Trevor Lawrence has had to lean on. But hopefully Travis Etienne gets back to full strength and can be, week in and week out, big play threat. And now Gabe Davis, I think that almost ultimately, I think Calvin Ridley's a better player, but in a lot of ways, Davis might be the better complement with Christian Kirk, and then ultimately Brian Thomas Jr. That's going to be what determines everything. If Thomas Jr. can be a 1, and then you move everybody else down a rung, right? Like Kirk becomes a really fun 2. Gabe Davis becomes an interesting 3. Evan Ingram somewhere there in the mix. Honestly, might be the third target over someone like a Gabe Davis, depending on where you're trying to attack on a given week. So I think this year this is the year where we need to see it out of Trevor Lawrence from a skill position standpoint. But I'll be honest, I don't really think Press Taylor brings a lot to the table as an OC. So I'm like holding out hope that after if it's rough for 4 games, Doug Peterson needs to take over. Because when he was calling plays a couple years ago, I felt like the Jags offense turned a corner versus what they were with Press Taylor. And then for whatever reason, they just had Press Taylor calling plays all last year. So I don't know. I don't know if they're trying to boost his stock to, I don't know. But I feel like if it gets rough and a little shaky, Doug Peterson, for the sake of his job, he needs to step over as a play caller. And I think ultimately it could get better in Jacksonville. But I think the talent around Lawrence is there. Press Taylor, Doug Peterson, big year from a play calling standpoint. Then we're going to have Jared Goff come in next up. And I like Goff. I like Goff. And this is part of the reason I did tiers. Mostly really good. Jared Goff is mostly really good. But there's going to be Lions fans that are like, nah, he's elite. He's top 6. And trust me, it's hopium season. I hear you. I'll be quick on this soapbox. Jared Goff is kind of like the quarterback. I'm like, this is a hill I'm willing to die on. He's good. He's mid-tier. But I just think for, where the Lions were pre the 9-8 season, where they, Aiden Hutchinson goes crazy. It's Rodgers' last game in Green Bay. The year before that, I had to look it up, but they were just dying going into that season to be a 500 team. And not only did they do that, they finished the year 9-8, over 500, and they keep the Packers out of the playoffs. It's basically a Super Bowl year for Detroit. And then the next step is, okay, cool, now we want to make a deep playoff push. And you did that. You made it to the NFC Championship game. That's awesome. That's fantastic. 4th and 2, Goff had to step up in the pocket because pressure was coming from Nick Bosa, the guy that everyone wants to tell you had a bad year last year. But, he steps up and evades that pressure from his left. And sure, maybe Josh Reynolds should have made the catch, but look at it. That throws off. Throws off to his right. And it's catchable. It's catchable, but you're making the receiver work way harder than he had to. And I get it. He had to step up in the pocket, but that's a throw Justin Herbert makes. That's a throw Joe Burrow makes. That's a throw I think Josh Allen makes. That's a throw Patrick Mahomes makes. That's a throw Aaron Rodgers makes. That's the difference between good and great. Mostly really good versus the next best thing. Great, sometimes spectacular. And the guy, obviously the tier that you can almost see now, best of the best. That's the difference. And I think that's the point I've been trying to convey. I'm not trying to take anything away from Lions fans. He is good enough to take you from sub 500 to above 500. Above 500 to get you to the NFC Championship game with some help, of course, right? And he even made a Super Bowl with the Rams. Great supporting cast, great play caller. Look at his situation in Detroit. Great supporting cast, great play caller. Great run game. More than he had in LA. Almost made it to the Super Bowl. Almost. He makes that throw on 4th and 2. The Lions are in the Super Bowl. That's where it gets tough. And Goff lost the Super Bowl for the Rams. And it's kind of the Brock Purdy thing. How often can you get away with great roster, pretty good quarterback? It's just a fascinating thing. And I know there's a lot of people who want to put Goff in a tier above that. And to me, he's just mostly really good, especially with a great system and a great situation around him. You can do a lot with Jared Goff. I'll go ahead. This might come back to bite. Jared Goff's not going to win a Super Bowl. He's not going to ever win you a Super Bowl. He's just not. He's just not good enough. So, sorry, Lions fans. I hate to do that. Lions fans are great to me on this channel. I love the Lions fans that watch my videos, and I hope that you continue to watch them. But Jared Goff, for whatever reason, is that guy where I'm not going to budge on this. He is QB 14 to 10 every year. Honestly, I need to do a quick count, and I'll give you the exact number on Jared Goff. Just touted up QB 14. And that means there are 18 guys behind him and only 13 ahead of him. That's a good spot to find yourself in, the most important position in the NFL. There are a lot more worse options than there are better options for you. But again, I just don't think he's going to be good enough to get the Lions Super Bowl. But we'll see this year. Maybe this is the year where I eat crow. Who knows? I'm sure I'll hear a lot about that in the comment section. Oh, this is going to be what sends specifically Lions fans over the edge. I'm gonna have Jordan Love over Jared Goff. And I know it's only the 1 year of Jordan Love, and the first half of the year wasn't great, but dude, the last 8 to 10 games of his season are they are great. And I mean, I liked him coming out of Utah State. The arm talent was there. Needed some work on the release point and whatnot. And I feel like over the course of the year, and even without like Christian Watson playing a whole lot, the Packers kind of receiver room, it found itself, right? We're going to use Jaden Reed for this stuff, which ultimately I think low-key Jaden Reed might be their best receiver from this year, our most productive receiver this year. And like we know what Romeo Doubs can be. And they started to dip their toes in this water, and I think this will be the year where it fully happens. If Christian Watson gets hurt, Dontavian Wicks is the dude to pick up in fantasy, because I think they're just literally going to plug Dontavian Wicks into that role. He's not nearly as explosive and like crazy fast as a Christian Watson, but he brings that physicality and that size and that jump ball ability that Watson also brings. But this offense is so much better with Christian Watson in it. So hopefully he's healthy. But I also think Josh Jacobs, Matt LaFleur, there's a lot to like about this situation. Hopefully the defense is better this year. Less to be put on the plate of Jordan Love in the offense trying to go toe-to-toe with people. I like Jordan Love, man. Beautiful spiral. He can throw it. The throwing motion's gotten there. He's embraced this Matt LaFleur offense. Can be a big play guy that wants to look down the field and take advantage of his arm strength, but also can play with time and get the ball out quick. And again, I think they found that right balance of who to use what when it comes to these skill position players. I'm buying into what we saw the second half of last year with Jordan Love. I may regret this, having Love ahead of Goff here, I guess, as what I'm trying to think. NFC North. Yeah, I got him ahead of Caleb and got him ahead of J.J. McCarthy. I guess I'm calling Jordan Love the best quarterback in the NFC North. That's pretty wild. But it's close, obviously. Him and Goff, 14-13. So don't roast me too bad. And they're in the same tier, so ultimately I see them very similar. Anyways, let's move on now. Dak Prescott is going to be ahead of that. Dak's a tough one because, like, love the above-the-shoulders work. I think he's a great processor. He's great pre-snap. And I think most games, I'd say about 85 to 90% of his games, great, accurate passer, really sound decision maker. And then that other 10% of the time, like I referenced this 2 years ago, he had the craziest no huddle call I've ever seen. It felt like something straight out of Madden, legitimately. And you can go and find it. It was the second time they played the Commanders 2 years ago. And he threw a pick six to Kendall Fuller. The play before that, the dude was wide open, and Fuller just like didn't respect him in the flat. Like he was willing to just come up and tackle him and let him have the few yards or whatever. And I guess Dak saw it, but he went elsewhere with the ball. So then he goes no huddle, same formation. They run the same play, and this time Fuller jumps that pass that you could kind of see was open. So it's literally just like Madden, where you're like, oh, I didn't see that guy, but that guy was wide open. No huddle, same play, and then you throw a pick because obviously the defense is keyed in on that. And I'm like, what the fuck was that? Dak is way too cerebral of a quarterback to be making reads like that. But I think the arm strength's there. He doesn't lean on his legs as much since the injury, but I still think he's mobile enough. And I don't think, I think Mike McCarthy, solid play calling year, but I still don't think that scheme was like elevating Dak as much as he and the scheme kind of maybe both helped each other, right? Like I don't think either one side or the other deserves the credit. And also like the biggest boost I can give the scheme was the ability that after 4 weeks, it was like, why are we not throwing it to CeeDee Lamb? That's almost like the biggest like tip of the cap I can give McCarthy. Like 4 weeks in, CeeDee Lamb's like, hey dude, give me the ball. And he's like, all right, you're right. That makes sense. Best receiver on our team. We'll feature you some more. And then all good things kind of followed after that. So, but also this is a team that had one win against a team over 500, and it was the second time they played the Eagles. Like same thing, kind of go back to Tua. The Dolphins had one win against a team over 500, and it was Dallas in Miami. So I like a lot of what Dak brings to the table, but got to win those big games, and you can't have those 10% of clunkers, especially when he has a clunker, dude. It's a dumpster fire. It's not just not his best game. No, it's bad. So I don't know. I've always been a Dak defender, especially within like my personal friend group. Everyone wants to shit on Dak, and I think he's a good quarterback. So it's tough, but he has games where it's like, ugh, he's not QB12. But that's where I got him at here on my rankings, QB12. And then the only guy ahead of him here in the mostly really good tier is going to be Kirk Cousins. I probably would have put Kirk in the great, sometimes spectacular tier. But the Achilles injury and his age, want to see a little bit of what that looks like. But the Achilles for a guy that's already been immobile, like it's not like it's taking away a skill set, right? Like Lamar Jackson pops his Achilles and it's like, ooh, his legs are a big part of his game. So like, what does that look like? Kirk's been immobile. He's been bad against, pressure in his face, coming up the middle of the offensive line. Like some things are just not going to change for him based on an injury. I think Achilles could ultimately be that. In a lot of ways, ultimately, I feel like it comes down to his mental confidence. Like, how does he feel, sitting on that, back foot, planning on that back foot, little things like that. But if he's got the mental confidence, I think Kirk Cousins is going to basically be who he was last year, which, need I remind you, like the Vikings, got into a rough start, but then started to win games. Like there was starting to be like stats wise, like he was one of the top performing quarterbacks in the league, and there was starting to be like a push that like if the Vikings made the playoffs, like could Kirk Cousins be an MVP candidate? And it was kind of moving that way, and then he pops his Achilles. Viking season's pretty much all but done by that point. Josh Dobbs kept it alive for a little bit, but like Kirk Cousins was putting up some insane numbers, and I mean in a great scheme. First time he had the same play caller in back-to-back years. And, like, yeah, he's not in KOC's offense, but KOC, Sean McVay disciple. Now he's going to the Los Angeles Rams where they hire Raheem Morris as their head coach. And Zach Robinson is their offensive coordinator, disciple of Sean McVay. So I feel like there's going to be a lot similar there. So he's essentially kind of working the same offense now 3 years in a row. So another reason to buy into him. And, yeah, it's not Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson and company, but Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and this offense with Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier. Okay, I want to see that. And not to mention Rondale Moore and Darnell Mooney. Like they've loaded this offense up with some good weapons. And if the scheme is better than Arthur Smith, which I'm going to go ahead and say that it will be, those guys are going to be way more valuable, way more productive than they were in the previous system. So like I'm feeling pretty good about Kirk Cousins. And this is also like ultimately Atlanta's the reason I decided to go with starter per team, because like where do I put Michael Penix otherwise? Like especially if I'm like accounting for next year's production, I'm kind of trying to do this like projecting what I think next year's quarterback situation is going to be across the league. Well, Penix kind of by default would have to be even behind Bo Nix, but Penix was my QB3. So like I don't know, it's really tough for me to kind of grade how much of next year's stats should I take into account. So again, if you want to know where I had Penix in that like overall, I listed out 40 quarterbacks where he was, just comment it down below and I'll be sure to respond to those comments. But other than the Achilles, I really am not too worried about Kirk Cousins in Atlanta with that scheme. I think the next 2 years that I'm assuming he's going to be the Falcons starter, he's going to be a damn good one. And then probably makes good money. And also, like, let me just throw this theory out there. There's only 2 more years of Brock Purdy being cheap in San Francisco. So 2 years of Kirk in Atlanta making his money, competing in the NFC, jump ship. He goes to San Francisco. Purdy gets a chance to go prove himself away from Shanahan. Hot prediction for 2 years out. Anyways, let's get on to the great, sometimes spectacular tier, starting off with Matt Stafford, dude. Like, I think about the Ravens game last year for Matt Stafford. He was making throws that I didn't think he could make 8 years ago. I was like, what the hell is Matt Stafford doing out here throwing frisbees and just laying them in there and then dropping them in a basket? So Matt Stafford, like the arm talent, both from an arm strength, but also like accuracy and ability to feather throws, all that's there. Only ding with him is just like, is he going to be able to play a full season, So like health and his age is catching up to him. But, last year when he was healthy and on the field, like, I don't think that arm lost anything. So probably another year or two of him being able to be a solid starter. I don't know. He could also be the next, coming of like kind of Peyton Manning, where it's like he was good, and then all of a sudden one season later, he just couldn't do it anymore. Like it was all gone. So I mean, maybe that's on the horizon for Stafford. But just looking at last year, dude, the arm talent's still there. He's got McVay's offense down. He can process between read to read, super, super quick, very accurate, and it's a system with 2 guys that fit perfectly in Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, and they've got great chemistry and great timing down with Matt Stafford. So, yeah, got to be in the great, sometimes spectacular. The only thing that kind of holds him back is sometimes he can be he can force a couple throws. He trusts his arm a little too much, but also the injuries play a factor in that as well. All right, from Stafford, let's go to Jalen Hurts. A little bit of a down year for Jalen, but I also think he was playing banged up, but I like the rushing upside that he brings. Not just for what he can do extending plays and scampering, but like I just think there's a lot of different like Kyler Murray's not a power kind of like, and you don't necessarily love this with their quarterback, right? Like we want Josh Allen to slide more, but like Kyler Murray's crazy elusive. I kind of like the power element with Jalen Hurts. It's not like overbearing, right? Like he's not trying to like level you and run through you like Josh Allen, but it's enough there to be like, damn, like guy's big, like like not fun to tackle. But I also think there were games last year where he kind of leaned on that a little too much because, hand maybe a little banged up. But I'm very excited to see with Kellen Moore. Like, I think Kellen Moore ultimately is probably more good than great as an OC, but I'm still a big Kellen Moore guy. And I think hard to imagine this offense being more stagnant than it was last year with Brian Johnson. And ultimately, I think we saw the change in coordinators on both sides of the ball were a huge part of the Eagles not being able to get back to the Super Bowl heights that they were 2 years ago. So I think bringing in Kellen Moore, that's ultimately for the better. They've got a handful of guys that could compete to be that receiver 3, Johnny Wilson, Aeneas Smith, Devontae Parker, Paris Campbell. So guys that all with very different skill sets that can kind of rotate in as that third option. Dallas Goddard, hopefully fully healthy this year. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, both also nice paydays too. So, and still the offensive line solid. Need Lane Johnson healthy, but they also addressed that in the draft with some additional depth. So feeling good about the situation there in Philadelphia. Really, it's just going to come down to a schematic standpoint. Can Kellen Moore do more than Brian Johnson last year? And if so, I think this offense is going to be just fine. And he'll get back to, honestly, probably the next best thing tier. I think he had him at QB5 last year, maybe QB6. I can't remember which one was him, which one was Lamar. But one was 5, one was 6. So he's a little bit lower this year. But nevertheless, still really like Jalen Hurts. And I think this year is going to be a step back in the right direction. Then we get Aaron Rodgers. And I'm going to, knock on wood when I say this, Jets fans. I'm not trying to put you through any peril. But knock on wood when I say this. Pretty confident he's going to make it deeper than 4 snaps into the season. So I'm not too worried about putting him here in the great, sometimes spectacular. And honestly, other than injury, I think Rodgers still got it. I'm not really worried about it. I'm really not. Other than his body falling apart, of course, which sometimes that just happens with age, and there's nothing you can do about it. No, there's no amount of ayahuasca that's keeping your body from deteriorating and not falling apart when mid 20-year-old super freak athletes hit you. So. Only so much you can do about it. I still think the arm talent's there from an accuracy, but also ball placement standpoint, mobile enough. And ultimately, Nathaniel Hackett's the OC, but it's Aaron Rodgers' offense. And, I think this year, Malachi Corley, Rodgers been talking him up. Could he be this year's or his new Randall Cobb? I think in a lot of ways that could make a lot of sense. Another year of him working with Garrett Wilson. We'll see what happens with Allen Lazard. I could see a reunion with Corey Davis. Maybe he decides to go somewhere else, but that could maybe make sense. One more weapon in the fray. And I do wish this team still had a little bit more weapons. And Mike Williams is there too, for sure. Mike Williams, if he plays 12 games this year, I'm happy with that as a Jets fan. If he only misses 5 games, that's a pretty good year for Mike Williams, in my opinion. No disrespect when I say that, but he's a guy that his play style almost kind of leads his body into those injuries too. So hopefully they get 12 plus games of Mike Williams, because then I feel better about him as a nice compliment to Garrett Wilson and another option that's not Allen Lazard, But I still think Rodgers has got it. It's just going to come down to, can he stay healthy? And also prioritizing Tyron Smith, Olu Fashanu as the 2 big, offseason additions makes a lot of sense for a guy coming off a popped Achilles. So I'm excited to see the Jets this year, man. I think they're a legit Super Bowl contender as long as Rodgers is out there. All right, then we're gonna get my boy Justin Herbert. He's just kind of emerged as one of my favorite players in the league to watch. I just love Justin Herbert, and I love the upside. And now and that's part of the reason too. I was praying that Jim Harbaugh would go to Los Angeles. To me, he was the top head coaching candidate available. He has worked wonders with every quarterback he's worked with along the way, and all he has done is win, specifically within the state of California. It's crazy how much success he's had there. So now he's in LA. Super pumped when they made that hire. Former NFL quarterback, cool. This is going to be the guy that puts the situation around Justin Herbert. I'm a little worried about the Greg Roman of it all. But also, if you take him at his word and, imagine Justin Herbert in an offense that can, capably run the football, it's oh, shit, yeah, that actually sounds pretty awesome. That sounds pretty great. Now, I'm worried about the receivers for sure. I like Ladd McConkey. A little surprised they fell the second round. Love that they added that. And even the 7th round guys, Cornelius Johnson, I could see him having a specified role within this offense, as a Donovan Peoples-Jones type. And then Brendan Rice, one of my favorite receiver, but liked him a lot better than a 7th round value. I had him way ahead of that. So if he can be, his tape at USC was tough because some weeks he looks like a freak athlete. Some week it's he's not really pulling away from guys. If they can even that out and he's working with his dad consistently like Jerry said he is, that could be one of the steals of the draft. And all of a sudden, it's oh, they got him, they got Ladd, they got Josh Palmer, they're okay. So they're going to need a couple guys to step up. Maybe it's a couple rookies. Maybe it's Quentin Johnston, right? One of his best games in college was against Harbaugh in Washington or Michigan. So if there's a guy to know how to use them, I think Harbaugh could be it. Ultimately, I think with where his route running is, it's probably just as a yards after the catch guy. Shades of how the Chiefs first started using Rashee Rice. It might have to be something like that for Quentin Johnston to build up some confidence. But all that to say, I'm talking about the situation around Herbert. Hopefully, this is the year where we see him become the next best thing. I have been waiting for him. He was my QB4 last year. Now, obviously, last year was a little disappointing. I feel like Brandon Staley didn't hold up his end of the bargain. Neither did really Kellen Moore. I think it was okay with the 1 year of him as the OC, but not what I was hoping. He's got all the talent. We saw him use his legs more than I had in years prior last season. The arm strength's insane. The accuracy's bananas. He's got just enough touch to layer it over the middle of the field in between safeties if need be. There's not much that Justin Herbert can't do. I just need the situation and the coaching and the team really to elevate its level of play so that way we can take him from great, there's promise, and we're waiting to see him flip that gear and become truly elite. I think this could be the year, even with the receiver situation where he becomes, he goes up a tier into next best thing and we start calling him a top 5 quarterback kind of unanimously. But I'm not afraid to say it. I got CJ Stroud ahead of Justin Herbert. And that was tough, man, because I like I said, I love me some Justin Herbert. And CJ Stroud, it's a 1 year sample size, but it's not like RG3 2013 where it's they invented the read option and the league didn't know what to do with themselves. there ain't much about C.J. Stroud the year last year that was a gimmick. That dude stood in the pocket. He extended plays by breaking the pocket. Showed us both of that where Ohio State, he was kind of just living in the pocket, and then the Georgia game happened, and it's like, oh, can he do that? Last year, he did both. The accuracy was bananas good at all three levels of the field. The arm strength plays at all three levels of the field. Great chemistry right away with Nico Collins, Tank Dell, sound decision maker. I mean, part of that too, like Bobby Slowick, I think, is good offensive coordinator, Shanahan tree for sure. But it also wasn't like the greatest run game. There were some games, definitely Devin Singletary put up some nice numbers, but Dameon Pierce was a disappointment. And Bobby Slowick was pretty insistent on running the ball too. So in a lot of ways, I think the offense could be better this year with someone like a Joe Mixon coming in and some offensive line improvements. Hopefully a lot of those interior guys that were rookies last year get better in year two, right? Like all these things kind of mount up to where the run game gets better, and in turn it gets that much easier, quote unquote, for CJ Stroud. So he might have a sophomore slump. Maybe I'm overreacting and he should be behind a legend like Aaron Rodgers, a guy who was in a Super Bowl 2 years ago, and Jalen Hurts, a guy who has won a Super Bowl in Matt Stafford. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. But honestly, yeah, I got him ahead of Herbert. Because, I look at last year, and I've been watching it back. He's been a really fun player to kind of go back and re-diagnose and kind of re-fall in love with, because it's like, no, it's legit, dude. There's not much gimmicks or flukes in there. Jay Stroud was doing it legit. And I think he's got a good offense, but a lot of that was on Stroud's shoulders on top of what Slowick is bringing to the table and that scheme's bringing to the table. So, yeah, Stroud's going to be the last great, but sometimes spectacular. Not a whole lot of bad games from last year. It's just kind of the 1 year sample size that it's like, can I fully buy into it? And put him in the next best things tier. But he wasn't far off. But we're going to kick things off the next best thing tier with Lamar Action Jackson. I mean, Lamar's a freak. Just won his second MVP. Awesome with the ball in his hands. I think Todd Monken he understands. Greg Roman really wanted to run these tight sets, 2 tight ends. But he congests the middle of the field by doing that. Todd Monken got it, dude. Spread him out. Make the middle of the field thinned out, and let the freakiest athlete at the position diagnose that and take advantage of it when he feels like it. But I've always lobbied, even as a Steelers fan. You can go on this channel. I have years of videos pounding the table for Lamar Jackson as a passer. I don't think the velocity is there from a zip standpoint. Make this 15-yard out, from the far sideline. Don't think his arm's like that. Not like C.J. Stroud, not like Pat Mahomes, not like Josh Allen, not like that. Herbert. But flick of the wrist, ball can go 60, 70 yards. Dude's got a cannon. And if that's what you're looking for, that's great. And I also think he can attack the middle of the field really well. And I think if Mark Andrews is healthy for a lot of last year, he becomes that much better at attacking the middle of the field. And, we'll see what happens with Tez Walker. I feel like this is an offense that's missing that man press beating guy. Maybe that's Walker with his speed. Could he be the MVS guy that plays X and you press him? And if you do that, lose the line of scrimmage at 6 for the Ravens. But also, if he's the X, then it's like, Zay Flowers gets to be the Y. He can play, or the Z. He can play off the line of scrimmage, put him in motion, play him in the slot. Rashad Bateman hasn't really been able to regain that weight since coming to the NFL. So he's probably better off the line of scrimmage as a Y. Really, he should be the Y. And kind of taking him away out of a press equation and letting him be a sharp route runner and finding the soft spot in the zone. He's kind of... He didn't have the size that I thought he was coming out of Minnesota, but he's still got a lot of that savviness and smarts that he showed with the Golden Gophers. And Zay Flowers is a big play threat, could be a yards after the catch guy, deep threat, pepper him over the middle of the field and just see what happens in the open field. You can use him anywhere. And he's just an electric football player that you want to have the ball in his hands. And of course, like I said earlier, Mark Andrews, sick. And you got Derrick Henry. So I think the situation's there. If Tez Walker can be the man press guy and deal with being on the line of scrimmage and freeing up those other guys to play off where I think they're going to be better, I think Lamar Jackson's in for another sick year as a passer on top of what he's going to do as a runner. And now that backfield features Derrick Henry. So read option is an automatic L facing the Ravens. Either Derrick Henry gets the ball or you have to try to tackle Lamar Jackson in the open field. Good luck, opposing defenses. Can't wait to see the Steelers try that twice a year. All right, leaving Lamar, let's get to my favorite player in the league, actually, Josh Allen. I'm going to have Allen behind Joe Burrow, and obviously we all know who number 1 is, but it's close for me who the number 2 quarterback is. And honestly, in a lot of ways, you can tell me it's Lamar too, with what I think of him as a passer. He's just a guy that get over that hump in that big game, and I'm there. I'm ready to stamp it down. He's the number 2 quarterback in the league. And also projecting this year, way better situation than what Allen's got. I'm a little iffy about parts of that offensive line at Buffalo. Obviously, receiver overhaul. Gonna be interesting to see what this looks like first full season of Joe Brady. But Josh Allen's also an alien. Dude is huge, a great rushing threat, hard to bring down. maybe the best pure miles per hour velocity arm in the NFL. These are the starters. Joe Milton's going to give anybody kind of a competition there. But of these starters that we talked about, maybe the best arm in the league, especially when it just comes to like power throws. Planting that back foot, pushing off, and just zipping it into a tight window. Allen can do that. He does need to be a better decision maker. And ultimately, I think part of that it was Ken Dorsey. And I mean, this theory is going to fully get put to test with a full year of a sample with Joe Brady. But to me, when I watch the Bills, and I watch them a lot, again, Josh Allen, favorite player in the league, to me, the fundamental difference was like Ken Dorsey wanted to be vertical and then settle for checkdowns or use Allen as a runner. And I think ultimately that vertical go mindset forced him into making some bad throws. Like I think about the loss they had to the Vikings at overtime 2 years ago, where he just staring Gabe Davis down and gave Pat Peterson one of the easiest interceptions of his entire career. And this was like still like Pat Peterson's washed at this point in Minnesota. And he was washed last year in Pittsburgh. But like it's like, Pat, you made that easy for Pat Pete at this point in his career. That's how you know that's a throw you should never, ever, ever. And it wasn't Pat Pete, it was Cam Bynum right behind him. Like it was a pick by one of two Vikings there. And I felt like that vertical-based offense just kind of forced him into some of those throws. And it still happened with Joe Brady, but this Joe Brady offense seemed more focused on doing what the Chiefs have started to do, right? Like two high shells are going to take away those vertical deep shots anyway. So you want us to play underneath, yards after the catch offense, attack the middle of the field, let's do it. The Chiefs have become great at that. There's stats out there showing the average depth of completion for Patrick Mahomes, and it started out like almost 17 his first full year as a starter. Like last year was like 2.5, 2.6 or something like that, if I remember right. Go look up the stat if you want to see the exact numbers. I think the Bills are trying to embrace the same thing. I think that's what Joe Brady's trying to do. And then when you look at Khalil Shakir in year 2, Dalton Kincaid in a year 2, you bring in a Curtis Samuel. Okay, all these little moves kind of make sense. And then they still have the big guys like Mac Hollins, Chase Claypool. Maybe both those guys make their 53-man roster. Here, Claypool's crushing camp, but those guys could be, and they also signed Marcus Valdes-Scantling. So they have 3 guys that could, I feel like 2 of those 3 probably make the roster, and 2 of those 3 kind of play the, hey, you're big, you're tall, you're fast, just go run a 9. Just go run a vertical route. Just go. And they're going to use those guys as clear outs to get the ball to Kincaid out of the slot. Get the ball yards after the catch situation for Shaquille or Curtis Samuel. I think I see where this offense is heading. And I think that's what I notice a lot. Joe Brady wanted to play underneath and then time up those shots deep down the field versus Dorsey wanted to play vertical, settle for those checkdowns. So it's going to be interesting to see. Just on paper, you look at Davis out, Diggs out, and who's there. It's a downgrade. But ultimately for the scheme, I could see a world where maybe it is a little better. I don't know. It's tough to say that, though. But moving on, number 2 quarterback in the league to me is Joe Burrow when he's healthy. I think about that San Francisco game last year. Like that's what he brings to the table, to where he's like a nearly unstoppable processor, decision maker, but not only like decision making, like this guy's open, this is the read, but like when I need to make this throw, hold on to it a little longer, boom, Jamar's coming open, there it is, there's the big play. Or okay, I need to get the ball out right now, boom, there's the throw, there's the completion, 2nd down and 2 now. He can just be so cerebral. And honestly, like that type of processing speed, I don't even think he's processing. I think he's just playing the game. Like I think he's just that natural of a quarterback, which is lazy scouting for sure lazy scouting. But the top of his game, man, he's a buzzsaw, and he's got enough mobility to make it work. But it's the arm talent, it's the accuracy, it's the touch that he can play with, the decision making, and the chemistry he has with Jamar. Next level, man. But all 3 of these guys, next best thing, obviously behind Patrick Mahomes, who's going to come in at number 1. I'm fine with any order of these guys. Lamar, Burrow, Allen, Lamar, Allen, Burrow, Lamar, Allen. Like, I'm fine with any mix of these guys. To me, these are definitively, and CJ Stroud just outside. Do it again in year 2, throw CJ Stroud in this mix. Hopefully Justin Herbert gets himself in this mix. But going into this season, not seeing that breakout fully from Herbert and only 1 year of Stroud, definitively these are the next 3 guys that I think are the closest to Patrick Mahomes. And then hopefully next year I'm talking about Stroud, Herbert, and maybe even Rodgers in that same tier, just behind Patrick Mahomes. Maybe Hurts too. I'd love to see Jalen Hurts get back to that tier. This was the tier he was in last year. Anyways, Patrick Mahomes comes in at number 1. Like, if you've watched football, if you're watching my channel, you know about Patrick Mahomes. I don't need to give you a breakdown of Patrick Mahomes. In structure, he's awesome. Gets the ball out quick. Great processor. And a quick release too. I didn't talk about that with nearly enough of these guys, but quick release. You can hit it from all different arm angles. And then play breaks down, or you just want to get him out of the pocket, crazy fun things can happen, whether it's the no-look passes, the behind-the-look passes, or it's just the deep ball. Like, there's not much that Mahomes can't do, man. Like, the arm is banana. And, like, you got to think, like, he takes the deepest drop of any quarterback in the league, and he still lasers passes over the middle of the field. Like, 20 yards out, still not a problem. And he's got, like, 10 yards deep in the pocket. Like, he's basically ripping it 30 to pick up 20. Like, it's crazy, the zip that he has on just any given throw when he needs it. But he also has sick touch. Like when he needs to, he can feather a ball with the best of them. So there's just not much that you want out of this position that Patrick Mahomes doesn't bring to the table. And I've said it time and time again, Brady's probably the most accomplished quarterback of all time, but from a pure talent standpoint, to me, Patrick Mahomes is number one all time in the NFL. But let me know what you think about that take, and let me know what you think about these rankings, 1 all the way down to 32. I just picked out who I think is going to be the most started quarterback, who's going to start the most games for each and every team. Left off some of the guys there at the bottom, like Jimmy G. I think Fields is better than Russ, and Tannehill's not signed. Ritter, definitively a backup in Arizona. So those guys are, conversation for another day. And if you want to know where I would put them, just comment down below. I do have a list of my top 40. So if you want to know like where Fields is versus Russ, just comment it down below, and I'd be happy to share that with you. But let me hear your thoughts on this. Who's too high? Who's too low? Who's your favorite team? Where would you put your team's quarterback in these rankings? And let me know what you think about the tiers. Did I get it right? Or would you tweak some of these labels? Or would you move a guy up into a different tier because you see them that high? Or drop them down to that tier because you see them more on that level? Love to hear any and all your thoughts about these 2024, these quarterbacks going into the 2024 NFL season. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hit the like button if you did. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. And I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I am signing off.